Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is defend, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Stephen. Stephen, thank you so much for sharing a great idea with us. Now, let's take a moment and review some of the ways that we can use this verb defend. The first way you may encounter this verb can mean to resist an attack that is made on someone or something. With this first definition, many people's minds will go to military, who are, again, resisting an attack, sort of fighting back. A second way you might hear defend used can mean to protect someone or something from harm or danger. There are various applications, software applications, that can protect our devices, whether they're computers, cell phones, other devices as well, from viruses or from attacks. So we could say it's defending it from those harms or dangers. A third way to use defend can mean to speak or write in favor of an action or a person. It can also mean to justify either an action or a person. With this particular definition, my mind immediately goes to current events here in the United States. There are many people speaking negatively about immigrants and refugees, and it's a group I work with quite frequently. So whenever I hear someone say something, I speak up and I speak about the contributions they make, how they make the United States a wonderful place to live and work. So I am speaking in their favor. I'm doing my best to defend. A fourth way you might encounter this verb defend is very specific to the law. So it's when one party conducts the case for someone who has either been accused of a crime or maybe sued in a lawsuit. A fifth way you may encounter the verb defend can mean to compete to retain a title or a seat in some type of contest or election. Sometimes we'll hear this used in sports, and I know I've got a couple examples of this a little later. We just heard it used quite a lot in November when there were elections in the United States. So if someone holds a position, let's say they're the representative of a particular district, and they are running to keep that position, right? Let's say they're trying to defend their seat. That's what that means. A sixth way you may encounter defend is, again, used quite often in sports. So you might encounter it in soccer or football, as it's known throughout the rest of the world. It's used quite a lot in hockey and even in basketball as well. So you're protecting one's goal, so trying to prevent the other team from scoring. For now, you should know that defend is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms the progressive defending. The past tense and participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now, the base verb defend ends in a D sound. Whenever we add an ed ending to a base verb that ends with a D sound, we're going to add an extra syllable to our pronunciation of that past tense and participle form. So I'm going to make an id sound when I say this. The past tense and participle form of our verb should sound like this: defended, defended. Now, I do have a few phrasal verbs that you might encounter, so we'll look at the meaning and look at some example sentences. The first phrasal verb you may encounter is to defend against. This can have a couple different meanings. One way it is used means to protect someone or something against a physical attack. So, an example of this: the soldiers defended the castle against the invaders. Okay? This really ties back to that first definition that we were speaking about moments ago. A second way defend against gets used is to mean to argue in favor of someone or something in the face of opposition. Okay, so an example of this. This attorney will defend the accused sheriff against removal. So here we've got simple future talking about our plans. This attorney is going to argue in favor of the sheriff why this particular person should not be removed from his or her position. Our next phrasal verb is to defend from. This can mean to make or keep someone or something safe from a danger, from some type of attack, or some type of potential harm. An example of this might be, vaccines defend our bodies from infections, right? They help keep us safe and healthy. The last phrasal verb we'll look at is to defend with. This can mean to use something to protect someone or something against a physical attack. So, an example of this. The man defended himself with a hockey stick when he heard the burglar, right? So we can imagine somebody grabbing this rather long and somewhat heavy thing that he might use to swing or whack at this particular person that has broken into the home. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day, and we'll practice a couple different verb tenses as we do that. Today, we'll review the past perfect and the simple future. Let's start with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions. But what makes it just a little different from the simple past tense is that we're specifically noting that this action was either completed before another action or before a certain point in the past. So that's really the emphasis here, that this action is occurring before some time or some other action. To form past perfect sentences, you're going to, in the affirmative, you're going to start with your subject, then you'll use had, H-A-D, and then the participle form of a verb. Let's take a look at an example. Russia sentenced the 3 lawyers who had defended Alexei Navalny to several years in prison. Thought this was a good example to help us kind of focus on that, on 2 completed actions. So you can see the verb sentenced there is in the simple past tense. We know this action has been completed. But the action of defending this person occurred before that. So this is why this writer has used these two different verb tenses together. It helps the reader understand what occurred first. If you want to make a negative past perfect sentence, again, we'll start with our subject, we'll use had, not, and then our participle form of the verb. Here's another example. Michael snapped that Greg hadn't defended him back then. So again, we've got 2 verbs here in this sentence. Snapped would be kind of like they spoke harshly here. That is in the simple past tense. Hadn't defended, our negative here, is in the past perfect, so we know that action was completed first or completed earlier. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the past perfect. To do this, you'll start with had, then you'll have your subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's an example of that. Had she defended Caitlin Clark before this game? Now that name might not make sense to a lot of people, but this particular athlete has been very popular in the last 2 years here in the United States. She became the leading scorer in NCAA or college basketball. She's the rookie of the year in the WNBA. And so we might be going back to that 6th definition regarding preventing her from scoring. So that's what that sentence is about. Now let's move on and talk about the simple future. Today we're going to make sentences with be going to. This is most commonly used when people are discussing their plans for the future. We still might see it with promises or predictions, but plans is the most common usage. This is a verb tense where we need to pay attention to our subject. We will be using a present form of be. So that means if your subject is I, then you're going to use am, going to, and then the base verb. If your subject is you, we, or they, you'll use are, A-R-E, going to, and then the base verb. And finally, if your subject is he, she, or it, you'll use is, going to, and the base verb. Here's another example. The university is going to defend its logo from trademark infringement. Okay? Now, this sentence, I would say, could go to preventing harm. It could also be leading into a lawsuit as well. Okay. Now let's talk about making negative simple future sentences. Again, we need to pay attention to our subject and use the present form of be that matches. Then use not, going to, and the base verb. Here's another example. We aren't going to defend these new policies. Right? So this might be that speaking out against. Somebody's saying like, I can't do it. I cannot justify these things. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the simple future, start with your present form of be, whatever form matches the subject, that subject comes next. Then we'll use going to and the base verb. Here's my last example. Is Simone Biles going to defend her Olympic gold medal in the 2028 Olympics? Okay. This goes back to that fifth definition where we're talking about someone who presently has something. So here, kind of a championship, a gold medal in this particular sport. And we want to know, is this person going to compete again to keep this title or, in this case, this gold medal? So I don't think she's decided yet, right? But many people are curious about her plans and if we will see her compete again. Now let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb defend. The first word we'll discuss today is the noun form of this word. It's defense. Okay. This noun has a number of different meanings. I think I picked 5 for us to look at most closely. The first way you'll hear the noun defense used can refer to the action of defending someone or something from an attack or helping them resist that attack. So an example of this might be, he came to the student's defense. So maybe we're talking about a teacher or another school official. Someone has accused students of doing something bad or maybe suggested something, and he's trying to say, no, right? He's defending, arguing in on their behalf. A second way to use the noun defense is to refer to the instance of defending a title or a seat in some kind of contest or election. Again, that matches our 5th definition of the verb. So, an example of this. How is the team doing with its title defense? So, we might be talking about a particular team. They won a championship in the prior season. And now we want to know, right? How is that going? Are they going to be able to still be the champions at the conclusion of this season? A third way to use the noun defense is to talk about either military measures or resources for protecting a country. So, an example of this. Leaders are debating the appropriate level of defense spending. So, here we're talking about money and how much money is going to be allocated to maybe various branches of military, to their personnel, to their equipment, their supplies, etc. A fourth way to use the noun defense is to talk about the case that's either presented by or on behalf of someone who has been accused of a crime or has been sued in a lawsuit. An example of this. What was their defense in the case? Right? So sometimes people will kind of argue back, present reasoning why someone should not be held accountable for something. A fifth way to use the noun defense refers to the action or the players whose job it is to defend one's goal against the opposition in a particular sport. So, an example of this. The team's defense has kept them in games all season. Well, this means that their defensive players must be incredibly strong, very skilled, and so maybe other teams are taking more shots on goal, but through the strong performance, right, it's keeping these games close and competitive. Now, you just heard me use the adjective defensive, and that's the next word we're going to discuss here. So one way to use this adjective is to describe something that is used or intended to defend or protect. An example of this. You need to have a stronger defensive posture. This could be like the way you're standing. Sometimes we talk about this with athletes. I can remember when I was training and competing in various sports, basketball and soccer come to mind, right? They would encourage you, just don't have your feet completely flat on the ground, right? It doesn't allow you to move quickly, right? I remember coaches like, we don't want to catch you flat-footed. So how we were moving and setting up our body could lead to better protection of our goals. Now, another way defensive gets used can mean and describe someone that is very anxious to either challenge or avoid criticism. So maybe you've had this experience in school or work. Someone says, hey, we could do this better. And the person immediately starts kind of arguing back, maybe making excuses, right? You might say, wow, her words and her behavior were very defensive, right? So trying to avoid new criticism mainly. Now, one last word for us to discuss today, it's the adverb defensively. So, just like our adjective, we can use this in a couple different ways. So one way is to describe something being done in a manner that is intended to defend or protect. Example of this, the military said it acted defensively. So here someone might some spokesperson maybe is saying like, we didn't start this, right? We were just protecting ourselves from attack. And then a second way to use it is to describe something being done in a way intended to challenge or avoid criticism. An example of this, he reacted defensively when he was questioned. Okay? So again, that way of like, how could you possibly think it was me? Okay. Again, a special thanks to Stephen for suggesting today's verb, and I thank you all for watching. Have a great day.